And that long period of silence, it could be viewed as God's anger, as him giving his people this silent treatment because they just couldn't get it together, or hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to this year's Christmas Bible study. This is truly the most wonderful time of the year. There's something so cozy about the colder weather, the Christmas decor, the twinkle lights, the hot cocoa. The joy of this season is easy to recognize, but what's easy to miss is its context of pain and suffering. Now, that might not seem like the most merry of topics for a Christmas Bible study, but even though this time of year is seen as the happiest time of the year, I know that for so many people, this time of year can be really heavy and really hard. Maybe another year has passed by without answers to a prayer you've been praying for a long time, or maybe this is the first holiday season without a loved one, or maybe you feel overcome with stress and the busyness of this season, or maybe it feels like no matter how many times you cry out, God feels radio silent. I just want to say that those feelings are real. I have been there, and I think that sometimes the Christmas season can almost magnify the areas that we're hurting because it feels like everyone else is just in this magical bubble and that we're supposed to be joyful, and seeing the joy on the surface of other people's lives just feels like it stands in stark contrast to maybe the sadness or the emptiness we feel inside. And so if that is you, I just want to encourage you to get real about that before God and with a close person in your life who you feel can listen and empathize and speak truth to you. And if you don't feel like you have someone like that in your life, I just want to remind you that I always have a link in my video descriptions to BetterHelp, and that is a super easy, super affordable way to get connected with a Christian counselor. And then my link will also give you 10% off as well. Honestly, I feel like I felt a little bit heavy these past couple of weeks just processing through some stuff, and just getting to talk through that with my husband and some other close people in my life. It made such a huge difference. It didn't necessarily change any circumstances, but it was a reminder that I don't just have to keep this all in my mind. I don't have to carry it on my own, and neither do you. And so if you're looking for a sign, this is it. If you want to check out BetterHelp, I'm going to leave it in a link down in the description. But as for today's video, if you are hurting this holiday season, I want to give a little Bible lesson that is going to bring you hope. I shared this on my Instagram story as I was prepping today's video, that I literally was brought to tears in prepping it because the hope that Jesus offers us is so beautiful and real and tangible. And I hope that this video can be a reminder of that to you today. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I make Christian faith and lifestyle content aimed at encouraging you to know God more through His Word and to grow in His likeness. And I would love to have you here, and then give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful or encouraging. Let's go ahead and get into it. So if you didn't know, the Bible is broken up into two main parts. We've got the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is 39 books from Genesis to Malachi, and this tells the story of creation and of God's people. It reveals to us our need for Jesus, and it prophetically points us forward to Him. That's the Old Testament. And then we have the New Testament. The New Testament is 27 books. It is Matthew to Revelation, and it begins with the 4 gospel books which tell the story of Jesus's life and ministry. And then from there it moves on into the early church, the spread of the early church, letters written to the church, and then ends with the book of Revelation, which tells of the restorative work that Jesus will one day come back to complete. And so we have the Old Testament and the New Testament, but between the Old Testament and the New Testament sits 400 years of cold, still silence. For hundreds of years before Jesus was born, God's people lived enslaved in exile, large in part due to their disobedience. No matter how hard they tried or how many times they tried, they could not live up to God's perfect standard of holiness, and their sinfulness caused them strife. They lacked belonging and peace, and they were intimately acquainted with the pain of unmet desire because they had been promised a coming Messiah who would bring freedom and restoration, but many generations had lived and died without ever tasting the fruit of that promise, and they must have wondered when God would come through for them, or even if he would. The very last words of the Old Testament are found in the book of Malachi, and here's what they say. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes, and he will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. So those are the final words of the Old Testament, and then comes the 400 years of silence. And that long period of silence, it could be viewed as God's anger, as him giving his people this silent treatment because they just couldn't get it together, or it could be viewed as a dramatic pause in a great symphony. The music has been building and building and building, and just before the most beautiful, breathtaking crescendo of the song, there is a silent, pregnant pause. This pause is interrupted by the first words of the New Testament in the book of Matthew, which say, the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Adam. All of the Old Testament is the story of God's creation, of sin entering into it and distorting it, of humanity failing and hurting each other and dealing with the effects of sin and destruction time and time again. When we read through the pages of the Bible, the point isn't to commend or condemn the characters we read about based on the good or the bad we do. The point is to have reflected back to us our glaring need for Jesus so we can see that the gospel is good news indeed. When we read the Bible, it's not a story about Noah's righteousness or Abraham's faith or Joshua's leadership or Ruth's loyalty or David's worship or Solomon's wisdom or Esther's courage or Daniel's resolve. No, but rather it is a story about God who worked in and through them despite their sin and shortcoming, and he does the same for you and me. The pregnant pause in the song leads us to that euphoric moment when there would be a change in the melody. After years of waiting and failing and striving and needing, Jesus enters the scene. Only a baby, but he would grow to live and die, giving up his life as a ransom for mankind, the only solution to disease and disunity and despair and ultimately death brought about by sin, the only one who could make all things right. The 400 years of silence leading up to the birth of Jesus were filled with seemingly stagnant waiting until they were interrupted suddenly by the most beautiful gift of all. And those silent years, they speak to this truth. Just because you don't hear God speaking doesn't mean he isn't working. And in the silence, he just might be preparing the most incredible turn of events you have ever known. This is why knowing the Bible matters. Every word and even the silent spots point us to the character of who our God is, and knowing him changes everything. My favorite Christmas song is O Holy Night, and my favorite lyrics from this song read, long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, through yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Advent points to a season of light himself piercing through the darkness at its peak. Whether this season feels happy or hard and heavy for you, remember this. Beyond all the bells, the baking, and the bows lies the true meaning of it all. A baby born in the town of Bethlehem, the thrill of hope himself who entered a weary world over 2,000 years ago. Because of Jesus, the struggle that seems never ending is not the end of your story. And because of Jesus, the hurt that feels all-encompassing is not the end of your story. His victory and his promise to make all things new is. I hope this video was an encouragement to you. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to hear from you in the comments, what is your favorite Christmas song? I can't wait to see you back here in my next video, and I hope you have the best Christmas.